Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, where we talk about pharmacy topics and careers, so you feel connected to the profession of pharmacy and inspired to contribute to it. I am your host and Ohio pharmacist, Kim Newlove. This is episode 293. The 2024 Pharmacist Authors Series concludes today. This is part 3 of 3. The goal of the series is to inspire you to write a book. Who is the third author in this series? It's me. Today, we're talking about my ebook and audiobook. The title is Pharmacist Podcaster, a podcast planning guide for pharmacy professionals. I'll tell you what the book's about, where you can find it, and more. I will also have 3 guests in this episode. If you've looked at the length of this, it is more than an hour long. The first 2 guests are my publishers. They are Dr. Janan Sarwar and Dr. Theary Chhim. They are from Publishing in Doses. And the third guest is my audio engineer, Julie Walthers. She helped me publish my audiobook. Now, I have a 30-minute interview with Janan and Theary, and then I have a 30-minute interview with Julie. So stay tuned. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my book, and then I will roll both of those interviews. If you want to hear parts 1 and 2 of this series from June and July, you'll want to check out episodes 282 and 288. Episode 282 was my interview with Dr. Steve Luke. Dr. Steve Luke talked about his memoir, A Pharmacist's Story, an authentic tale of true love, family, addiction, and the practice of pharmacy. And part 2 was my interview with Dr. Helen Sairani. She talked about her second book, which is titled The We You Don't See, Understanding the Long Shadows of Trauma. Again, that was episode 288 for Helen and episode 282 for Steve. Links to both books and pharmacist authors are in the show notes. You'll find those on thepharmacistvoice.com. All right, let's get started talking about my book. What's the name of my book and how long is it? It is called Pharmacist Podcaster, a podcast planning guide for pharmacy professionals. It's a 59-page ebook, and the audiobook version is 92 minutes long at 1 times speed. If you want to crank that thing up to 2 times speed and have it take half the time, 45 minutes, you go right ahead. Now, in the ebook, you'll find text and images, but there's also something special that's not usually in a book. I have worksheets. There's a worksheet at the end of each chapter. Publishing in Doses was my publisher, and they did a great job making the whole thing easy on the eyes. I like how they formatted it, and there are images and illustrations in each chapter. I love what they did. Now, what's Pharmacist Podcaster about? It's about planning your podcast. Let me share the introduction from the audiobook with you at this time. It does a great job of explaining the 12 chapters and the worksheets. Here you go. Introduction. Welcome to Pharmacist Podcaster, a podcast planning guide for pharmacy professionals. If you want to start a podcast, you're in the right place. This book will help you plan before you launch. There's an overwhelming amount of information available about podcasting. From printed books and audiobooks to podcasts about podcasting, websites, coaches, online courses, YouTube videos, and even more choices, it's hard to know where to start. I felt overwhelmed by information when I started my podcast too. When you learn anything new, the messenger is essential. I am a pharmacist. If you're a pharmacist too, we may think alike. I'm also an experienced podcaster. I'll tell you what you need to know so that you can avoid time-consuming rabbit holes, stuff you don't need to buy, and frustration with the podcast planning process. This book covers 12 topics. Number 1, your why. Number 2, how to start. Number 3, time to publish. Number 4, tools and gear. Number 5, MP3 files. Number 6, research. Number 7, writing. Number 8, artwork. Number 9, media hosts. Number 10, websites. Number 11, advertising. And number 12, your recipe. The worksheet at the end of each chapter contains critical thinking questions, assessments, or problem-solving activities. Thoughtfully complete each worksheet. When you finish the book, you will have a plan for your podcast. Mindset is important. Keep an open mind as you read this book. Podcasting is a creative endeavor, and there is more than one way to create a podcast. Create a recipe, not a statue. Your podcast should have ingredients that can be changed over time. It's easy to change a recipe. It's hard to change a statue. My podcasting coach, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, introduced the recipe analogy to me, and I love it. I am a pharmacist, and pharmacists use recipes. Remember to answer the questions or complete the assessments and problem-solving activities. They will help you build your podcast recipe. As with podcast show notes, some of the products and websites mentioned in this ebook have links. Click them to learn more. Happy podcasting! Again, that was the introduction to Pharmacist Podcaster, a podcast planning guide for pharmacy professionals. 59-page ebook or 92-minute audiobook. Now, usually I interview somebody else, another pharmacist author in this series, but today I'll be interviewing myself. So let's get to the questions. Why did I write Pharmacist Podcaster? I wrote the ebook to help pharmacists and pharmacy professionals in general plan podcasts. So it is a podcast planning guide. Behind the scenes, I'm also using this book as a branding tool. It's like a business card and also a lead magnet for my business. I am a pharmacist podcaster, and Pharmacist Podcaster is part of the title because I'm giving you, the reader, an aspirational identity. I'm trying to help you become a pharmacist podcaster too. The title serves two purposes. It's my title, and it's the title I want you to achieve as well. Pharmacist Podcaster. As far as being a lead magnet for my business, I sell a self-paced online course about podcasting. It's a behind-the-scenes look at the Pharmacist's Voice podcast, and I show you behind the scenes of my podcast to help you plan yours. And I also offer one-on-one consulting. So if you like the ebook or the audiobook or both, you might like to buy my online course or work with me one-on-one to start your podcast too. The very last reason that I wrote the book was to see what the book publishing process was like. Now, I coach pharmacist authors to narrate their own audiobooks. I like to encourage those pharmacist authors to publish the book and the audiobook at the same time. I was curious how hard it would be for me to do it, so I did it. I had a great experience, and working with Janan, Theary, and Julie, my team, was a lot of fun to do. It was like publishing with friends. Even though it was fun to publish this book, I must say that publishing takes determination and either a good team or somebody who's willing to Google a lot of things and look stuff up on YouTube. I had the right team for me. I really enjoyed my experience, and it really didn't seem that hard. I had the right topic. It was very on brand for me to write a book about podcasting and then narrate the audiobook. Not many pharmacists are authors, voice actors, and podcast hosts, so it just was the right combination of variables. I had the content, I knew a great publisher, I knew a great audio engineer that could help me with the audiobook, and together we made this thing happen. Now, again, even though I enjoyed the experience, I do feel like I just walked a mile in someone else's shoes. I tell people all the time, take your book and narrate the audiobook and publish them at the same time. Now I know what it's like to do it. I wrote the book, I narrated it, and I published both at the same time. I'm always encouraging pharmacist authors to do that too. Now I can say I did it. And you know what? Being a role model for that experience and being a resource for other pharmacist author narrator combos is really important to me. I have now practiced what I preach. That's enough about the process. Now that the book is done, I am excited to share it with you. If you want to start a podcast, you need to read or listen to Pharmacist Podcaster, a podcast planning guide for pharmacy professionals. It will be available on my website by Monday, September 2nd, 2024, which is Labor Day. Actually, Monday is Labor Day. Either go to thepharmacistvoice.com and click the store tab, or go straight to kimnewlove.com. That is my online store. Click the Learn More tab under the phrase Start a Podcast. That's where you'll find it. It's important for me to mention at this point that it is a free ebook and audiobook. I am offering this at no cost because it is a lead magnet for my business. I hope it helps you, of course, but I'm offering it at no charge. All right, let's move on to the next topic. When I interviewed Steve and Helen in this year's Pharmacist Authors Series, I used a set of questions. I'm just going down that list. So let's get to the rest of those questions now. The next one is, what authority do you have on the topic? In this case, it's the topic of podcasting. I'm talking about a book about podcasting on a podcast. How ironic is that? But anyways, I can speak to that question. What authority do you have on the topic of podcasting? Well, I have published more than 350 podcast episodes over 5 years, and I have 2 podcasts. I have the Pharmacist's Voice podcast, which you're listening to now, and I also have a local podcast that I do for my community. It is called the Perrysburg Podcast. You can find that at perrysburgpodcast.com. I am an experienced podcaster, as you can probably tell, and I also teach a self-paced online course about podcasting, and I also help pharmacists start podcasts as a consultant, and pharmacy organizations too, I should say. Now, to write this book, how did I get the content? What I did is I pared down a lot of content. It's only a 59-page ebook. So where did I get this content? I looked to my online course. I created all this content, like 7.5 hours worth of content, and I pared down the content from my online course about podcasting for this ebook. But wait, there's more. There's also the content that I had from an article series that I published in a monthly newsletter for my Toastmasters Club, and that was starting almost 2 years ago, back in November of 2022. Now, as far as the worksheets, I had worksheets in this book, right? This 59-page ebook has worksheets. The worksheets came from my local Podcasting 101 classes here in Northwest Ohio in 2023 and 2024, and my online course. I have worksheets in the online course, and I've used them locally. Now, in addition, I got some of the content for this ebook from some presentations that I've given locally. I give some Podcasting 101 talks. I guess you could say they're local Podcasting 101 classes. And I've also given online webinars. Speaking of online webinars, the last resource that I used to create this ebook was the one that made the biggest impact. And I'm going to try really hard not to cry when I say this, but in February of 2024, I gave a webinar to Dr. Asha Pai Bohannon's Mastermind Community. February 2024, Dr. Asha Pai Bohannon's Mastermind Community. What I did was I recorded myself giving the talk, and then I transcribed it. That transcription became the framework for Pharmacist Podcaster. Writing the book was actually easy. I had all this content and all this experience. It was like having a coloring book, right? I could see the picture that I was coloring. I just needed to grab my crayons and apply the color to the pages. Asha's webinar was the picture that I was coloring in. Publishing in Doses helped me color in my pages. I wrote the book, but they helped me format it, and they put the illustrations and graphics in it. I was inspired, but I also had help. Thank you, Asha, and thank you, Janan and Theary, too. This is future Kim. I was listening to the playback, and I just got to jump in here and say that I didn't mention why it almost made me cry to talk about this. this webinar. Dr. Asha Pai Bohannon died unexpectedly in June 2024, about 4 months after that webinar. So as I was writing this book and finalizing it, I was able to go back to a recording that I had made with my friend who was now dead. So I missed my friend and I loved my friend. And I felt like my friend helped me write this book from beyond in a way. I know that's kind of spiritual, but I wanted to share that with you. So now you know why it was emotional to record this. Let's move on. Who is the target audience for Pharmacist Podcaster? My target audience is any pharmacist or pharmacy professional who wants to start a podcast. If I get even more specific, it's for anyone who wants to start an independent podcast. Independent as opposed to a podcast that will go onto a network. With all due respect to networks, networks give you the fish. I teach you how to fish so you can feed yourself for the lifetime of your podcast. I hope that makes sense. Networks will help your podcast get published, but if you ever want to leave, if you have creative differences or you want to monetize your podcast a different way, or whatever the reason is, you may not know how to switch to an independent podcast. There are risks. I suggest you start with an independent podcast. I help pharmacists start independent podcasts. Let's keep going with the questions. When should someone read this book? I recommend you read this book before you launch your podcast. If Start a Podcast has been on your to-do list, I'm telling you, you need to check out Pharmacist Podcaster. It will help you plan before you launch. What do I want you to do with the information after you read the very last page of Pharmacist Podcaster? I want you to make a decision and take action. Finally decide if you're going to start the podcast or not. If you want to do the dang thing, then just do it. If you need help, buy my online course or reach out, schedule some time with me. I love helping pharmacists start podcasts, and I can help you too. I love podcasting. At this point, we are at the very last question on the list. What advice do you have for pharmacist authors? Here's my advice. Let me say first that if I can do it, you can do it. That's my biggest advice. Second, I would say be clear on what you want to communicate. The framework of questions that I use for this whole Pharmacist Authors series is actually a really nice framework for thinking about like writing a book. What do you want to talk about? Why are you writing it? What authority do you have on the topic? Who are you trying to reach? Who's your target audience? When should your audience read the book? What do you want them to do with the information once they've read the last page? How will you distribute the book, the audiobook too? All of these things are great questions. And then finally, I would recommend just start writing. You don't have to be perfect. I mentioned earlier that I started with this online course that I had created, and I created an article series for my Toastmasters newsletter. They have a monthly newsletter for 12 months in a row. I contributed to that. I know this is kind of outside the box, but you may have content like me in places that you didn't think to look. I wrote an ebook from content that I already had, and maybe you have content too. So just think about what you want to write about and just start writing. Don't try to be perfect. It's okay to just get started. My little ebook was 5 years in the making. I had to get into podcasting first, and then I had to do all these other things that built my authority on the topic. Writing about it was easy. Podcasting is my jam. I love it. That passion helped me bring my project over the finish line, and I must say, I couldn't have done it alone. This book only happened because Publishing in Doses and Whole Story Studio helped me. They are the reason that I get to talk about having a finished ebook and audiobook in this podcast episode today. And this is a great time to transition to my conversation with my publishers, Dr. Janan Sarwar and Dr. Theary Chhim from Publishing in Doses. Couldn't have done it without them. Let's roll the interview. Hello, Janan and Theary. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you. Janan, I think it's your third time on this podcast, and Theary, it's your first. Welcome.
Thank you.
Today, we're going to be talking about your business, Publishing in Doses, and how you help pharmacists and others publish. Tell me a little bit about Publishing in Doses. Janan.
Publishing in Doses is our latest entrepreneurial adventure. Theary and I connected. We met in 2022, decided that this is something we should create. We started it in late 2023, around the time we met you. And our goal is to help pharmacists and other healthcare providers who are interested in publishing their books, help them self-publish.
Excellent. Theary, anything to add?
It's just been like an organic experience because of the experience Janan has had in publishing and myself in design. So taking on this adventure has been super fun. We've learned a lot of things. At the end of it all, it's all about making sure it is fun. Like it is fun. Like a company that we're doing is fun for us to do. So I've loved it so far. And it's crazy that it'll be about a year coming up toward the end of the year.
Theary, I think we had an introductory type conversation back in October of last year. I was trying to look through my emails. We connected, but Publishing in Doses was not the reason. It was just you wanted to meet other creators. We had a great conversation. And I think towards the very, 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 very end, you mentioned Publishing in Doses, and you were joining forces with this other publisher or this other creator. And it sounded so much like Janan. And I said, "Are you talking about Janan?" And you said, "Yes, that is who I'm talking about." Promptly after that, I contracted COVID and had to go into hiding for a couple of weeks. But I remember contacting you both afterwards and then saying, "How does this work?" I think we had a conversation, and then you became my publisher. I don't know if that's how it works for others. We'll find out about that in a little bit. But I think first we need more background. Janan and Theary, I'd like to hear about each of your roles. Theary, let's start with you.
So my role is more of like the creative in a sense of like design, visual design. We'll get a manuscript and we'll ask our author or soon to be author some questions about, who their target audience is, what their goal, even things from like color preferences, concepts that they have in mind. So we'll go through all of that. And then we kind of collaborate back and forth to see, just to see what design would best reflect the author's book or ebook in this case. And we take it from there. At the end of it, I also do social graphics for promotional purposes, depending on the platform. And in some cases, landing pages for web. So I can do a variety of print, product, and web. And for me, it's a really great outlet to kind of bring to life someone's idea, to help them connect with their audience. So it's really fun for me.
I think of you as an illustrator and also a graphic designer. Would that be fair?
In this space, yeah. Like in this space, yes, for publishing, there's element of design for the interior. So you have to think about layout as well and making sure that, certain key parts of the book is highlighted in a way. So definitely in this space. As a full-time role, I'm a UX UI designer. So it's a little bit different, but for print, definitely illustrator and graphic designer.
Good to know. And then Janan, I know you wear a lot of hats as well, but when it comes to Publishing in Doses, what's your role with Publishing in Doses?
Yeah, my Publishing in Doses role is to help people with their concept understand for them, what does that final product look like? Not from the design perspective, but what was their purpose and how can I support? I have publishing background for over 11 years now. I've worked at a nonprofit traditional publishing house at the American Pharmacist Association. I have done medical writing, I've done medical editing, and I also have owned my own mission-based hybrid publishing company, which is what we talked about on a previous interview together. That's called Global Bookshelves International. Why I teamed up with Theary, why we created Publishing in Doses was to have a separate solution specifically for our peers in pharmacy or anyone in healthcare to work with professionals like us, because we're pharmacists as well. And we have this non-traditional approach to helping people who are saying, you know what, I have an idea, I have content, I want to help this extend my brand. I want to self-publish. There are different reasons people publish. And once someone's decided that self-publishing will work for me and something that I need to do, that's part of the role that I play, of just making sure they understand what the pros and cons of self-publishing could be versus other types of publishing. And then we go from there. And I'm supportive on the editorial side and kind of handing off and reviewing the content in different ways.
Thank you, Janan. You both have tremendous value, and you certainly have helped me with my project. When I think of publishing, there's so many different things you can publish in printed word. You can do an ebook, like you mentioned. You can do a short ebook. You can do a long ebook. You can do a printed book, children's book. There's so many different types of books to be published. What kinds of books do you typically publish? What's the typical product with Publishing in Doses? Janan.
We are focusing on content that is nonfiction, that is helping pharmacists or healthcare providers really promote their brand or their content. So typically, we're working with manuscripts that are going to be nonfiction reads. It could be an ebook, it could be a print book. The whole idea, and we like to call it having your book as your business card, as a way to let people and your audience know what you are a thought leader in, what you can do, and how you can help solve their problems.
I like that. Theary, anything to add?
We've also done another form of business card would be a journal. We've done a design for pharmacists, and it's a self-empowerment journal. That was her focus. It was a really fun project, light, and it really took her own experiences. And she knew that she would be able to help others do that too. So that's another type of project that's not manuscript based.
Thank you. That gives my audience an idea of what they can start dreaming up for themselves. I want this episode to help inspire my audience to be an author too. Write that book, write that first book. Now, when it comes to your ideal client, Janan and Theary, I'd love to hear who's your ideal client for Publishing in Doses. Theary, why don't we start with you?
Someone who sees the value of creating a book, for in your case, ebook as their business card. Like they really see that they have a ready to go manuscript. The content is ready. They may need a little bit of editing, but it's there. They just don't know how to get that physical or virtual product ready to go. So, they don't need much help on editing, writing, at least for Publishing in Doses. So someone who's just, hey, I have this. I don't know what to do next with it, but it's solid. I love it. It's just ready to go. I just need a little help with getting this self-published. So that would be part one. Definitely someone who has that ready to go.
I would add to that individual knows and is already connected to who their target audience is. So they know who they're speaking to. They already have a connection, or they're trying to build a connection. And a book is the means to bridge that gap. And so that would be another characteristic of an ideal client.
Janan and Theary, you're both pharmacists. I'm a pharmacist. One would think that you only work with pharmacists. Is that the scoop? Is that really what's going on at Publishing in Doses?
So far.
Okay.
So far, it's been all pharmacists, and it's been amazing. We're open to everybody else, but it's almost like knowing what it's like to be a pharmacist, but also having an entrepreneurial spirit and a creative side or a message that you really believe in. So empathizing with other pharmacists, it's just been a pleasure. Like so far, everyone who's worked with have been pharmacists.
Someone once told me that if you try to help everyone, you will help no one. I see that you have found a niche helping pharmacists, and I congratulate you on starting with that niche. naturally you will attract one-offs, right? Possibly nurses, doctors, physicians' assistants, who knows, veterinarians and dentists too. I wish you all the best as you move forward with this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. How does an author know they're ready to work with you?
I can take this. Individuals who have thought and researched publishing a little bit. Maybe they've looked into what does traditional publishing look like, or, maybe they explored and Googled different publishers and they realized, you know what, I want more control in the way I share my concept, my idea, my book with the world. The person that's ready to work with us has that clear vision. They need support in publishing a manuscript, and they want to work with two helpful, fun, intelligent pharmacists that do think outside of the box, that have experience in publishing and design. That is when you're ready. When you have that manuscript, you're ready and to create something. It's a co-creation where we're working together, and we want to support you because your win of being able to publish your book, your idea, is a win for us as well.
I like your team attitude. Go team.
Thank you.
Anything to add to that, Theary?
No, you said it really well, Janan. Awesome job.
Every pharmacist loves a process. What's your process like?
If we could focus on print, I guess the ebook too. You start with the manuscript. When that's ready and finalized, then you have a cover design. Also with the cover design, you end up doing interior, so interior design. In that print process, we work together and collaborate with the authors to figure out, is this the style you're looking for? So we can get it to a finished product that looks good, feels good, and resonates with your target audience. After the final manuscript's been approved, then we think about any social media assets that you might need to promote your product, or social media graphics that you might need to be put on whatever platform you're hosting it on. Some people have asked for landing pages to promote their author if they don't have a website. Some people don't need it because they already have a thriving website. So it's project dependent.
Sometimes people are so focused on the publishing, they don't think about the promotion afterwards.
Theary did a great job describing the process of working with us to get a final design. And some of the other elements would be whether you are printing your project, obtaining an ISBN, determining whether you need to get copyright, the barcode, distributing your book, the printing. Getting all of those are lots of behind the scenes things that we help think through and decide together what will work best for you. It really does depend on the project and the scope, but it's something that we have knowledge and experience in.
I respect and appreciate your experience. I certainly had never done this before, and I very much love a plan. I'm one of those people that loves that Story Brand book by Donald Miller. I need a guide with a plan. And it seems like early on, when we had our first discussion, you had something written down, and it wasn't very, black and white, very formal, like it's either this way or that way. There was some gray area possible too. It was just like a framework, more or less. And I could see myself in it. And I think that's kind of what you're describing. There's all these major elements that happen. And depending on if it's a journal or an ebook or a printed book, you're going to fall into these categories and need to check these boxes. I just wanted to jump in there and add my 2 cents because when you're new to this, it doesn't make sense. And I needed you guys to help me make sense of the process. I appreciate everything you did to guide me through it. You were my guides with a plan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You are most welcome. You've been an amazing client. We'll talk more about that later.
You betcha. All right. Now, a lot of people, when they write a book, they've got this manuscript, or they think they've got a manuscript, maybe hasn't been completely edited yet, but they've got what they think is the final manuscript, and they come to you and they say, hey, I'd like to publish this. In general, with your experience, on average, how long does it take to publish?
I'll jump in to say, realistically, we like to share that it's typically going to take a minimum of 6 months or so to publish. That might sound like a long time. It does depend on the manuscript and project length. It could be faster, but this is really taking into an account for design, proofreading, reviewing proofs, looking through what might happen in your own life. And then if it is going to be a printed product, setting up that distribution, setting up the printing process to obtain samples. So those are all things to think about as far as why there's a timeline, and it could be longer too.
That's fair. That's fair. For anybody that's never published before, they need to know these things that, it doesn't happen overnight. What you think is a finished product may take time to sort out the niceties, all the little things, the illustrations, the cover, maybe a misspelled word, an S missing or a quote, end quote missing. You never know.
Yeah.
Theary, what do you want to add to that about the amount of time it takes to publish?
There are a lot of other factors too. I can speak from the design perspective. Ideally, it's the final manuscript because it impacts layout. I use InDesign. And so when you're laying out, let's say a 200-page, 150, 200-page book, and let's say you decide to insert a new paragraph, that paragraph can impact the layout of the following pages. So it adds to the timeline, which is why we always want to encourage sign off, final product. Typos can happen. That's easy to fix. But like new content coming in, that's something we like to make sure our authors are aware of. And then also concepting the illustrations or iconography or picking a type font that is free to use, considering that, explaining color and contrast. Those are things that I'm thinking about with their brand colors. Like, is this going to work? Is this going to be accessible? Can people read it? Is it legible? Those are other things that I take into consideration when we're publishing a product. And I also want it to look good. Like, I want it to look so good that they would be so proud to have it and promote it. So that, I think there's a little perfection in everybody, but at a certain point, there's a deadline. You got to hit the deadline. Everyone's happy, and that makes me happy. So that's definitely a different design perspective into why things can take longer and how much time it takes to create a layout or cover.
Janan and Theary, I want to share something with you that you didn't know that I was going to share. When I started my first podcast, I got the idea to look into starting a podcast in April of 2019. By December 2019, I had a podcast, my very first podcast. To go from idea to published, it took me 8 months. The second time I did it, it took 1 day because I knew everything.
Wow.
Yeah. When I started my local podcast, the Perrysburg podcast, I've got to ask you, do you have any second-time authors working with you at this point? Second time working with Publishing in Doses?
We're so new that this hasn't happened for Publishing in Doses, I would say, but the reason Theary and I created this was a result of I knew a lot of pharmacists. So the job I had at the American Pharmacist Association connected me with so many, over 200 authors that I'd worked with in the past. And what that led to is, as I'm doing my other passion entrepreneurship with global bookshelves, I would get questions and queries from pharmacists and other people who would say, I want to just pick your brain on, I have this publishing idea. I don't think it fits for global bookshelves, but I wish you could help me. So this company was born out of needing a solution for all these people that I've worked with in the past. So yes, there are some repeat people that I've worked with in the past. I have personally that are pharmacists, and we hope that we'll have many, many more clients that come back to working with us because it is a fun process, and that's my favorite thing. Why am I a pharmacist in publishing, and why do I love what I do? I love having people go from concept to final product and being able to see that transformation and support them in a way that helps convey the topic, the theme, that concept that is going to take them to the next level.
Theary, I'm going to ask you a question, kind of a follow-up to what Janan just said. I know she said she's had publishing clients from her previous role at APHA come on board with Publishing in Doses. Could you see a book for me, my second book, taking less time from idea to published with Publishing in Doses because I've already worked with you two?
Definitely. Just because you already have the framework there, we already know your brand colors, your fonts, the style, and it's all depending on what your new topic would be. But if it's in this collective with podcasting, we could I think it would be a lot more streamlined because all the expectations are already known, and it's communicating with you has been so effortless, and you're very collaborative and open-minded, and you treat this as like a learning experience as well. So to us, it's like the best experience working with a client. So thank you for that too.
Well, you have a deal. I don't know when my second book will will come out, if ever, but I wanted to. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, yes, I can see you guys doing this for a very, very long time. I wanted to make that comparison though, since my book is about podcasting and I do have that comparison that I can share with my audience. I thought I'd kind of pick your brains and see, do you think it would take as long the second time as it took the first time? I don't think it would, because I think I would know a little bit better about what I need to do. And I also wouldn't have so much travel in my way. I went to like 6 different countries, I think, while we were trying to publish this. My bad. That does slow things down. Just so you know, if you're listening to this and you want to publish a book, don't go to different countries and travel and not have access to a computer. It does slow the process down. All right, we'll get to my story in a little bit here. I wanted to finish the list. I gave you guys a list of questions, and I would be remiss if I didn't stick to it just a little bit here. I wanted to ask if anybody in my audience who has heard how fun you are and how easy of a process I have had working with you wants to work with you too, how can my audience work with you?
Visit us on publishingindoses.com. Once you know what your publishing idea might be and who it serves and how it will solve that target audience's problem, book a free consultation with me, Janan. It's available on the website, publishingindoses.com.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I may have gone the same route, actually. I think I went to publishingindoses.com, filled out the contact form, and then we got rolling. And here we are a few months later, and I have an ebook. Yay. Now, I know you just covered that first step to working with you, going to that website. Is there anything I missed about working with Publishing in Doses that you'd like to share?
That's the kickoff point, and we'll explain the rest later. But it's just a really good way to open the door to see if we're a match too, like if we're meeting your goals as well, if we can deliver on that. Because there may be instances where what we can provide or what you're looking for may not match with what we're able to deliver. So we'll be honest in that. We both have to agree, like this is going to work. And so I'm happy that we were able to work with you and deliver on what you were looking for.
I'm a happy girl too. Thank you. Yeah, I know what you mean about coming to agreements, because what you as an author, so what I as an author had in my head is actually what you had to offer. I kind of got lucky. I don't know if everybody gets that lucky. I felt like it was super easy to work with you guys. So thank you very much for everything you've done for me. And at this time, I kind of want to draw a parallel between the general information you just gave and my experience. I know I've kind of put in my 2 cents along the way here, but I want to ask you, what makes me your ideal client?
Kim, you came in and you knew you had a goal. And as you just shared in part 1, you shared with us about your goal to help pharmacists have a way to expand your connection with the people that you want to engage with. And you are an ideal client because we're looking for those individuals who see the value of creating a book or an ebook as their quote unquote business card.
Yes, I did. Awesome. Thank you for pointing that out, because again, coming to agreements here. If I, as an author, came to you and asked for something you don't offer, it's not a good match. I think we were simply a good match, and I appreciate that so much. Theary, anything to add before I move on?
I don't know. It was just super helpful that you knew what you knew what you're wanting and the strategy you were going with. It makes our job easier to know, like, okay, we can align on these goals and deliver. So just being clear on what you're looking for is important. And we can help talk through it as well. You know, if you're not so sure yet, and maybe table that conversation for a later project. But at least definitely contacting us and having that first initial conversation helpful.
Absolutely. One does not walk into an ice cream shop and demand a salad. It's, expectations. I wanted an ebook that I could use as a lead magnet for my business and also help potential podcasters too. It all worked out. Yeah. How did you know that I was ready to work with you? Because even though we talked about it and you knew what I wanted, how did you know I was ready?
For me, I knew you had a clear vision of an idea for your content. You had the background of what the content would be based on a lot of experience from various ways. So putting together and submitting a manuscript, which is what we waited on before kicking off and actually sending you back a formal proposal with all of our steps of how we were going to take your manuscript to the next level, was the moment we were truly 100% sure you were ready.
That manuscript, that is the big ingredient in the recipe, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Theary, when I came to you as a team, was there any question that I was ready?
definitely not. Like you were ready. I don't know. When you just know, I guess.
Theary, would you say that I followed your typical process too?
Definitely generally, from manuscript design, approval. The only difference would probably be what makes it special is that you have an audio part of it. That makes it really special, and it ties back to what your goal is with this and what you do and what your pharmacist voice. Like this is podcasting, and to have an audio version of your ebook, it just all ties it in together. So that makes it very unique and very special. So, but definitely generally, yeah, very straightforward process.
Nice. I like to hear that I'm pretty average. Seriously, I'm glad because it's my first book. I'm happy to hear that I kind of followed the process because that was the question, did I follow your process? And it sounds like I did, which is great. Now, how long did my project take versus how long you may have expected it to take?
We did the math, and from when you submitted your manuscript to now, when it's about to launch, it has been around 6 months. And I know we were saying we wish we could produce a book or a content in a day. We had that concept earlier, but honestly, you do meet the typical timeline because of the steps. There's certain publishing steps that are core that regardless of you maybe being able to create the content in a quicker way, you did a wonderful job and we followed the steps in the process. And the travel also is what impacted. I think you could have done it faster if we didn't have that, but otherwise it was pretty typical.
Thank you for saying that. Again, I am happy to be average. I did travel a lot during this period. I think I started writing it in January or February. I know I don't have to go through that right now, so I'm not going to, but I just feel like I wanted to have this done by Labor Day, and that's what's happening. So I'm really, really happy with how long it did take, just so you know. Theary, anything to add?
If anyone out there is interested in self-publishing, even if they're just not sure or they have something and they're looking forward to getting it self-published, definitely reach out to us. It'd be great to just have a kickoff conversation to see if we are a great fit and really help create your product, bring it to life, make it a real thing, a real tangible thing that you could share your book as your business card.
I love that call to action. Yes, it's worth filling out the form, exploring what publishing in doses can do for you. I second that. Thank you. Now, here comes my recommendation, and then I'm going to open it up for any comments. My recommendation is that anybody who's interested in self-publishing, do that initial thing. Go to publishingindoses.com, fill out the contact form, get in touch with Theary and Janan, and see if publishing through Publishing in Doses might be for you, especially if you are a pharmacist. I had a fantastic, fantastic experience. And at this time, I'm going to ask Janan and Theary, do you have anything else you'd like to add as we wrap this up?
I really wanted to take a moment. This is Janan, to just say what an honor it was to work with a client like you, Kim. You came in knowing what you wanted. You provided clear expectations. You gave us amazing, thorough feedback. You provided us grace anytime there was something we needed to get back with you on. And it was just a pleasure overall to work with someone like you. And we're so excited for the launch of your ebook and audiobook.
Thank you so much. Theary, anything to add?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your collaborative energy, your perspective on things, you're empathizing with the process, maybe coming with a concept, delivering on an illustration, but that might not be what you were looking for, or maybe another illustration would have worked better in the design process with you. It was really fun. And I just appreciate your energy and your time. And I definitely look forward to working with you, hopefully in the future. But more than anything, excited that you'll be launching soon and sharing it. So we'll wait for you to share the process, behind the scene things. So looking forward to it. And again, thank you, Kim, for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And in the words of Elle Woods in Legally Blonde, we did it.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it.
Janan and Theary, thank you so much for being here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast to talk about publishing in doses. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks again to Dr. Janan Sarwar and Dr. Theary Chhim from Publishing in Doses for being my guests today. I hope you have a little bit better understanding about publishing, the process, and the benefits. You can use a book or an ebook as a business card. Great idea. Reach out to Publishing in Doses if you're interested. Now, don't leave just yet. I have another interview to share with you. At this time, I'm going to transition over to my interview with my audio engineer, Julie Walthers from Whole Story Studio. Here you go. Hi, Julie. Welcome back to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me back. It's been too long. I'm excited to be here.
It's been a whole year. I think you're the only person that made it back onto the podcast for the next year's Pharmacist Authors Series. I don't think any of the authors from last year got invited, but you did. You are my audio engineer, and this is our third book together. I'm so excited. I love how it turned out.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, it's super, I'm flattered that you're inviting me back. And of course, every time you've come to me, I'm just excited to work with you and see what you have for us.
Awesome. I'm excited to work with you every time too. This is our third time working together. It's been a treat. For anybody who missed episode 222 last year for the 2023 Pharmacist Authors Series, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself and your business?
My name is Julie Walthers, and I am the founder and lead engineer at Whole Story Studio. And even though I'm based in West Palm Beach, Florida, I work with authors and narrators all around the world, actually, and work with them as they sort of navigate the audiobook process. So a lot of times they're just finishing up what they're writing on, and they want somebody to work with to read their work, or they are a aspiring author narrator and they need somebody like me to help them pretty much hold their hand as they learn the process and record their audio and go through the publishing process for the first time. And so that's something that I really enjoy doing.
Half of my situation fit into, I think, that second thing that you just described. I am a first-time author, but I'm not a first-time narrator. That's actually probably pretty rare. How many times does that happen?
Almost none. Occasionally, I will get somebody who is their public speaker. So they've already sort of been on the public speaking circuit, or you, I believe, are my first ever podcaster. So occasionally, I think maybe only one or two other times, I'll get someone who at least feels comfortable speaking. But a lot of times it is somebody who has never recorded a book before. And this is not only their first book, but their first recording experience. So that's a lot of fun for me too.
Oh, the variety. What is it? The spice variety makes? Isn't that a cliche of some sort? Variety is the spice of life.
Spice of
right?
life. Yes.
Yes.
That is what it is.
Yeah, you get a variety in your business. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have evolved. I came to you as a never been author, but first time narrator. And then I was a second time narrator. And now I'm the author and the narrator. So let's talk about that one this time. I wrote a book, right? I went through a publisher. My publisher is called Publishing in Doses. And I was able to give you basically the manuscript, which is the book, the ebook. It was 59 pages long, including worksheets. And then I gave you basically a production checklist. Even though a book may have certain parts, for example, a table of contents, that does not get narrated. So I gave you a checklist of what I wanted in the book. And then I also gave you all these files, all these audio files. I had so many. I narrated the chapters and then the worksheets separately. And then I uploaded so many different pieces and parts. And then let's talk about, what did you do with those pieces and parts?
Okay, so first of all, you are a dream client to work with. For anybody listening who might be interested in doing this one day, one thing that makes my life as an engineer and as a producer easier is when the authors or the narrators, or the author narrators, as we have here with Kim, they submit their audio in clearly labeled, organized files. Okay, so Kim here, she uploaded everything just so nicely labeled. I knew what was chapter 1. I knew what the worksheet for chapter 1 is. Like, the file naming conventions were so clean. I know that's like such a nerdy thing to be excited about, but especially when you could have hundreds of chapter files if somebody, or hopefully not hundreds, but you could have dozens and dozens. I have had hundreds before. And so when the chapter file name or the file names are not clear, it could be a problem. So at any rate, what Kim did was she uploaded everything to our happy little folder. I always create a shared Dropbox folder for everyone because it's just easiest. And she gave me the checklist of what she wanted in the book. And then, of course, I had the manuscript. And that was my roadmap. That was literally like what I needed. And when I'm importing the audio to my DAW, which I use Pro Tools, it all magically goes just where it needs to go. So, it was really great. And then, of course, I did have to, just like any book, I have to confirm how people want some things to be presented. So one thing, for example, I had with Kim in this book is that we had the worksheets for every chapter. And I didn't know, as the engineer, do we want the worksheets to be their whole separate file? So you can sort of toggle back and forth between worksheets, or did you want the worksheets to be consolidated within the chapter that it belongs to? So that was something, as anything, you have to clarify how you want that to go. But Kim is so, so wonderfully communicative. And she just makes the process for me easy. And I hope I make the process for her easy. And it was great. It was a super wonderful project.
Thank you for saying that. I do like to organize information. It is one of my superpowers. It's very nerdy, but I love it. I really do. And I think I learned a lot about naming files. For example, I use an underscore and then I do 00 and then the name of the chapter. For example, room tone. I usually give you a sample of my room, what the room sounds like in case I have an oopsie or you need to add 3 seconds of silence at the end of a chapter, whatever. I know these things from being an experienced narrator. And then I go with, underscore 01 and so on. I think I may have learned that from you, Julie, when you gave me my finished files from my first project. I thought, oh, that's how you do it, and that's how it's supposed to be done. And then uploading everything to ACX and then distributing it on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes is a breeze, because the audio engineer like yourself gives me such clear communication. So I'm basically giving you right back what you have given me. Thanks for teaching me.
You put organization out into the universe and it only comes right back to you. Oh,
yeah, but
that's
talking
great.
about these nerdy details might help somebody, because they just may not know. And if they want to work with you someday or work with me, I do help pharmacist authors who want to narrate their own audiobooks, but they can understand that these little minute details are what you get when somebody is coaching you who knows what they're doing and they've been there and done that. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's when you are working with your engineer for the first time, if you're a first time narrator author, creating a relationship, just like a lovely working relationship with them where you feel comfortable asking questions. And if something just doesn't feel right, bringing that up to them. If you don't know, well, what is the peak in RMS? Or if you don't know something, you really want to have an engineer that you feel comfortable talking to and that will be able to communicate, just the process. And so something that I pride myself on is that I love the people I work with. And I think I have a genuine friendship with pretty much everyone that I've worked with before. And they do feel comfortable bringing things up to me if they're not happy with something or they just need something to be changed. It's not it's not a thing. They are able to just communicate that with me, and assuming I can fix it, I will fix it, and everyone's happy.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's important to understand as a narrator and author, maybe that hasn't ever done this before. Whoever you are listening to this, and whatever point in your journey of being an author or a narrator you are, you need to understand that if there is something that you feel in your heart is not quite right, it's okay to bring it up and say, hey, I noticed this. This doesn't sit well with me. I'd like it to look like this. Can we do that? And as an audio engineer, Julie understands that if it's within her realm of tools, she will do that for you. And I actually had a situation with that where there was a little bit of space between, we call it a slate. When there's the chapter title, chapter 1, your why, there was a little bit of space in there. And I said, you know what? I hear it. I don't like it. And I said, can you just tighten it up? And she did. It's the simplest thing in the world. But Julie never would have known that I had a problem with it had I not brought it up to her. So anyways, clear communication, knowing what you want and asking for it is very, very important. And then your book turns out like mine and you're totally satisfied with it. And you're recommending your audio engineer to all of your podcast audience. So those are the benefits of speaking your mind. Anything to add, Julie?
Relationships are important. And I know it's hard when you don't necessarily know the process to speak up. In our case, just recently, I was treating this newest book as like a traditional audiobook. And so I was putting in the room tone, right? The room tone breaks on the chapter slates like I would if it was going onto Audible. And in my mind, I was like, this is what a chapter slate sounds like. And Kim just, right, she's like, you know what? This doesn't sound good. I think we need to change it. And I did what I needed to do. And honestly, Kim was right. And I was like, this sounds way more natural for the type of book that she was doing. And that's the kind of thing that a good engineer is not going to take offense. They're not going to be like, nope, this is how things are, because really it's pretty subjective. So that's why I also like working with Kim so much, is that we can just do that. And that's not an issue.
Yeah, it didn't feel confrontational. Thank you very much for basically meeting my expectations. There was a certain way I wanted it, and you gave it to me, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Now, let's talk about this particular project, because there was no publisher, like that I had to meet specs for. There was no Penguin Random House Audio. I didn't have to follow their style guide, and I didn't do too much what I call doing a Gary V. Gary Vaynerchuk goes off script all the time. He'll say, all right, guys, we're going off script. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And he goes on a rant. I didn't do that. I thought I might, but I didn't really. But I also didn't follow every single word the exact way it was printed. And I told Julie I was going to do that. And I said, just ignore that. For example, there was one chapter where I was talking about, for as much as I know about podcasting, I am not the only person you should be listening to about it. I added the words about it because it just felt right, and I told Julie, ignore that. And good job, Julie, you ignored that. I appreciate that, because then I don't have to do a pickup, meaning I don't have to go back and do it again.
Yes. Yeah. So if you are narrating your own book, author narrators are usually given a bit more leeway in their read in general, just because they are the ones who wrote it. So it's not like, it's not necessarily going to be an issue unless it's totally the wrong word or the intention is not the same. Perhaps they just read something completely off, or they ad-libbed something that just changed the whole feel of the section. With Kim, that was not an issue at all. But if you are an author narrator and you are working with an engineer and you know that you went slightly off script, that's the kind of thing that you do need to let us know, because in general, we strive for 100% accuracy, meaning every word that you speak needs to align with the manuscript. And so even if you say, I went into CVS instead of I went to in CVS, I don't know, I would actually mark into because it's not what it says in the text. So telling your engineer whether you're okay with small misreads or small changes to the text that don't change the meaning versus you want 100% accuracy is super important, so that you don't get more re-records or pickups than you want, and we aren't marking them because it takes time on both ends. So thank you for giving me that instruction.
Yes, clear communication, like we talked about earlier. And how many pickups did I have in this book?
You had 0 pickups, which is, in my world, we call that a flawless victory. And I actually owe you a flawless victory sticker.
Oh,
so, thank you.
I didn't know you had that sticker. I didn't know I was getting a prize. Thank you, Julie. That's great.
I feel like it's a big thing.
I think every narrator should go for 0 mistakes, but it's not always possible, and it's normal to make mistakes. I just want to set that expectation for any pharmacist authors who may be listening to this and think, oh, I wrote it. Of course, I'm not going to make any mistakes. You know what? I made mistakes. I just fixed them before they got to Julie, and it all turned out just fine. But had I not known how to do that, then I would have leaned into Julie's experience, had her report those mistakes back to me, had her give me what do you call that? That track?
We call it, the correction, the CRX track. We call it a voice match. A voice match file.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would have been working on my pickups, so to speak, and you would have been knitting them in. So even if you do make a mistake, for any pharmacist authors listening to this and you want to narrate your own audiobook, even if you make mistakes, Julie can fix them. Do you have anything more you want to say about pickups?
Pickups are just a natural part of life. And while, yes, it's always lovely to get a book that has very few pickups, because eventually you can get to the point where having too many pickups will ruin the flow of the book, because as somebody if you are the narrator and you have to re-record things, it is very, very important that you are able to, that's why we call it a voice match your voice and match your speed and match your tone and match everything as closely as possible to the original recording, because I am really trying to stitch everything together. And if I'm constantly stitching in sentences that you aren't quite matching the way that you originally recorded, it could sound a little funky, despite my best efforts. But making mistakes, having misreads is just it's just a natural part of the process. We include that in the whole project booking. We assume you're going to have a number of things you're going to have to re-record and that I'm going to have to put in. So please, even though 0 misreads is lovely, it is certainly not realistic a lot of the time.
Right. I think my first book I had somewhere in the teens. Second book, I think same thing. But this book, it's short, right? It's 90 minutes, right? 90 minutes, 92 minutes, maybe something
92
like that.
minutes.
Yeah, there you go. It's a short one. So my stats are a little cleaner because it was a little shorter instead of being 5.5, 6 hours long. So I am, again, very happy that I did not have to do my pickups. And yeah, I'm very happy that you are able to fix them if I had needed you to. All right, now let's move on. We already talked a little bit about, in the very, very beginning, about how sometimes an actor will narrate an audiobook. Sometimes the author will narrate the audiobook. When it came to this project, how different was my self-published book, I guess author-read audiobook, different from any other project similar to this that you've ever done?
So author reads are special for me, just because I know how much work has gone into the whole. I mean, this is your baby. From conception to birth. You're like, this is really something that you have spent so much time doing, and it means a lot. And so I really do try with authors in particular and first-time author narrators to make sure that this is a nice experience for them and they don't feel frustrated and overwhelmed with the process. When I'm working with more, I'm going to call them career voice actors, to read anything, to read a manuscript, it's just sort of, we both know what the process is. And so there's not as much, I don't want to use the word hand holding to be condescending, but it's mostly just like, okay, here's your due dates. Here's when your correction, I call it a CRX pack. It just stands for corrections pack. Your corrections pack will be uploaded by such and such date. I need your pickups by this date. And then I'll have the mastered audio for you by this date. And it's very much, even though it's still friendly and I'm always willing to answer questions, it's more just like they also have other books they need to get to. They don't necessarily need me for too much. And so it's just a little bit quicker process. There's not as much back and forth, but I also have a lot of early stage voice actors, which I also love, who do need a little bit more validation. They need a bit more help. They want to make sure that their booth sounds good. If they're having issues, I'm more than happy to help them with that. And so it's just it's fun to work with people at every stage of their careers and the process. And everybody kind of needs something a little bit different from me, and I'm happy to give that to them.
I respect and appreciate your experience and the, I guess, collaborative approach that you're talking about right now. Wherever you're at, I meet you where you're at. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks. I try.
You're welcome. I think you mentioned scheduling just a few minutes ago because, career voice actors, they have schedules, right? And I had to schedule time with you. I told you, I don't know, maybe in July, hey, I'm going to have an audiobook project. Can we work together? And you said, yes, let me get out my schedule. And, you emailed me some dates. I can do it I think it was the week of August 5th or the week of August 12th. And of course, Murphy's Law, let's go with August 12th. And it turned out to be the best choice. And I think by then I had started uploading, I think by August 5th, rather, I had started uploading files and everything was done on time for me. And you were able to work on it that week. It worked out fine. I got it back on the date that I expected to. And yeah, it all worked out. Any comments about scheduling for my audience?
Thank you. So scheduling, for those listening, I am more or less a one-woman show. Over the last year or so, I do have a couple incredible contractors that I work with if I really can't get in a project, but myself. But of course, I love the client. I want to make sure that they get their audiobook done. But in general, I want to take everything because I love doing this. And so for me, if you are contacting me, I need, a few months, usually a few months in advance, 2 to 3 months in advance for when you need your audiobook to be completed. With this most recent project, because it was so short and I know my schedule, my weekly schedule, it says, okay, I could certainly work on this while I'm waiting on some other things and still get this done for Kim and make sure it sounds good. But if you have something that's more than, 90 minutes and we're looking at like 5 or 6 or 7 or 12 or 20 hours, we certainly need more time. And the way I schedule, again, is, I need your raw audio. And that means right now, everybody is recording remotely, meaning if you are an author narrator and you've never recorded anything before, you need to find a recording studio or engineer to help you record. Kim is, just like, she's like a unicorn in that she kind of like has all these, these skills. And so she's able to record on her own because of this podcast. But I personally will not have a studio until the end of the year. So I can't record for people just yet. But if you happen to be in the West Palm Beach area, at the end of the year, please, look me up. But that's an aside. Apologize. But if you are an author narrator and you're recording for the first time, you need to make sure you have a good setup for that. And then you would contact me and see when I can get you in, or one of my contractors, perhaps, if you need something sooner. And I have a whole scheduling thing. I'll send you an invite, our calendar invite, so it's also on your calendar, and make sure everything is set up. And it's really just very, very important to make sure your audio is in on time, because again, I'm mostly doing this on my own. And when audio doesn't come in on time, it's like a domino effect for me, because I schedule out specific number of hours a day to edit. And if I don't have those hours, they don't just magically disappear, right? So I have to do it at some point. And so that's, I think I went on a huge tangent, but if you are interested, definitely the sooner you can contact an engineer, the better.
Thank you for mentioning that, because this is not something that pharmacists really deal with. Pharmacist authors, in my experience, they write these great books and then they often don't narrate them, or they don't hire a voice talent to narrate them. I am trying to set the expectation that pharmacist authors listening to this, you can write your book, get it out in print, and you can narrate the audiobook or hire someone to narrate the audiobook and publish them at the same time. It is entirely possible. Julie, would you like to talk about that?
Yes, it is entirely possible. So if you have a release date for your hard copy book, which you generally know well in advance when it's going to be released, and you want to have a simultaneous release with the audiobook, which is ideal, absolutely. But if I don't stress if it doesn't happen, or maybe it's a week or two off. Of course, everybody wants to release everything at once, and so what you can do is you really do have two options. You can record it on your own and find someone who is familiar with recording audiobooks. So one of the issues I've come across with another pharmacist author was that she needed someone to record the actual raw audio for her because she didn't have a setup at home. She wasn't a podcaster. She just needed a space to record. And she went to a recording studio that was not familiar with how to record an audiobook. They were, as far as I could tell, they were music based. They didn't have a proper setup for her as far as like the space. Recording an audiobook is different than recording music. And so you want to ask your engineer who's recording you initially, do they have experience with audiobooks? And do they have experience with a technique called punch and roll? That's key, because if you are recording, you will inevitably, trip on your words, make a mistake, and you'll need to go back and fix it. And some engineers they do a straight record, which is they record everything that's happening, and they send that all to the post engineer to clean it all up, which is at least twice as expensive. I do charge at least twice as much for a straight record versus a punch and roll, or you record punch and roll style and you sort of clean up those issues as you go. And so if you are looking for an engineer to do your initial record, ask them if they've done audiobooks before. And I'm happy to send Kim some questions that you could ask a potential engineer if, when you're initially trying to figure out if they're good for you. Or you can cast a narrator to read for you. And there's, a voice for everybody. And so I have a wonderful roster of narrators that I work with. Some do a lot of nonfiction work, some do fiction, some do romance, some do, it's a lot of narrators have their niche. And so if you are somebody who wants to publish a book and have a really professional sounding audiobook, but you don't want to read it, then you simply just, reach out to someone like myself and say, hey, can you help me cast this? And we can find you the right voice.
Thank you for talking about your ability to cast the right voice, because that will help my pharmacist author friends to publish their printed book and their audiobook on time. I know a lot of pharmacists think they have to do it all themselves, and therefore they kind of trip into perfectionism mode, like I have to buy the right mic and learn how to use my recording software. Oh yeah, which recording software do I need? And oh yeah, how do I use it? It's a bit of an onion or a domino effect, and trust me, you don't want to deal with it. So just hire somebody, hire a professional, or like Julie said, I love your recommendation, vet out some studios. There are places in this world where you as a pharmacist author can go to a studio and somebody else records your voice, and they give you those files probably on a flash drive, and you can upload them, possibly labeled as nerdy as mine are, to Julie through Dropbox. And then she can perform her magic, wave her wand, give you back a finished product that you will love, and then you can distribute it wherever you need to, on Audible or, Amazon, Findaway Books, which I think now is Spotify. And
Spotify.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different places where you could distribute it. So anyways, I just want to give you some hope and bring it together. And if you need some help narrating your audiobook, contact Julie. I am also available to help prep narrators, pharmacist authors who want to narrate their own audiobook. Either one of us is a great choice, but your audio files are going to end up with Julie anyways, because that's who I'm going to send you to. Any other recommendations for pharmacist authors who want to narrate their own book, Julie?
If you are interested in narrating and you want to make sure you do a good job, I do have, you can talk with a voiceover coach, just to sort of give you some of those basic techniques, because I know, you think you could read your own work easily. And I'm not saying you, like the royal you, like we all think that we could read something that we've written almost flawlessly, but it's actually quite difficult. And narration is a little bit different. And so it's nice to have a good technique. And so talking with a voice coach, just to say, maybe you need a few lessons, just to sort of get your breathing technique correct, and making sure that you're drinking enough water, having an apple so to avoid some mouth noise. There's all these little tips and tricks that as an engineer, that's not my space. I know a bit here and there, but that's something I would suggest. And if you do want to record, there's a lot of resources out there. There's the Narrator's Roadmap, which is a fantastic resource for new narrators or people really trying to get into the business. So it's Narrator's Roadmap is something that I suggest, and I get a lot of my own information from. And just do your research. And if you have any questions, reach out to people that you trust, like Kim. And, word of mouth is really a great way to find somebody and see who's the right fit for you. And you can do it. It's not that you can't. It's just putting in the time and the work. I know, anybody could record their work if they're willing to put in the effort. That's my advice.
Yeah, that's the narrating pep talk. I love it. And one thing I was thinking of as you were talking is that when you were talking about having some voiceover training about breathing and how to say things, one thing that you could do, this is from me as an author to you as a potential pharmacist author here, there is such a thing as write it for the ear with your pen. You know what I mean? Like write it like you're going to narrate it. Write it the way you talk. I wrote my book the way that I talk, and I think it sounds like I'm talking. Yeah, it sounds more like a podcast episode than it sounds like an audiobook, in my opinion. But that's just me, and I'm totally enthusiastic about what I do with podcasting for sure. But I think it's really cool that I could put something about my role as an author and a narrator into a podcast episode. So this is really cool to be able to do this today. And Julie, as we wrap this up, is there anything else you would like to add?
First of all, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, especially when it comes to our health. Assuming that that's the topic of your books, it's something that people need. There's certainly a market for what you have for us. And I would just sort of wrap up by saying, find an engineer that you get along with, or at least feel comfortable enough to ask questions and give, feedback for your work. And if you, don't feel like you have to do everything on your own, like Kim said, if you find that perhaps reading is not for you, there are people who do this for a living, and they could really do a wonderful job, like a beautiful job. They will take your words and really give it life. And it's really fun. I've heard from a lot of authors how wonderful it is to hear a professional voice actor read their work. And it's just a lot less. It just takes a huge load off your shoulders. But again, it's also really satisfying to hear your own voice out into the world. So I wish you all the best of luck. And I'm, a real person who's happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I love those tips. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with my audience. Thanks again for helping me with my book, and you take care, Julie. I'll see you around.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Thanks again to Julie Walthers for being my third guest today. I have never done a podcast episode where I've got two different interviews in it. Not that I can remember. This was really, really long, but really, really fun to record and put together. My whole point of this Pharmacist Authors Series is to inspire you to write a book and hopefully publish the audiobook at the same time as well. If I can do it, you can do it. I certainly had the right team, and I would love to work with them again. Great experience. I recommend Publishing in Doses and Whole Story Studio to you as well. They did a great job for me. They might be a great fit for you as well. This has been the Pharmacist's Voice Podcast, episode 293. Visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes, you will find links to my online course platform, kimnewlove.com, my business website, thepharmacistvoice.com, Publishing in Doses, Whole Story Studio, Dr. Steve Luke's book, Dr. Helen Seyrani's book, my social media links, and more. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. If you know someone who is a pharmacy professional and wants to write a book or start a podcast, kindly share this episode with them. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thanks for listening today. I will talk to you next Friday.